The invitation came on a Wednesday afternoon, neatly placed atop the stack of mail on Ethan Walker's mahogany desk. It was embossed in gold, heavy with pretension, and reeked of irony. Claire Bennett, his ex-fiancée, was getting married. Not just to anyone, but to the man she had left Ethan for 2 years ago without a second thought. She hadn't bothered with an explanation back then, and now she had the audacity to invite him to her wedding. Ethan stared at the card, a tight smirk pulling at his lips. "She wants me to see her happiness," he muttered, "to remind me I lost." But Ethan Walker was not a man who liked losing. That night, as he left his downtown office, the streets were soaked in a soft drizzle, and the city lights shimmered like polished steel. As he passed a quiet corner diner, his eyes caught a figure huddled by the sidewalk. A young woman, soaked, her clothes tattered, but her eyes sharp with defiance. Something about her presence halted him. Impulsively, he stepped toward her. "You need money?" he asked. Hands still buried in his coat pockets, the woman looked up slowly, brushing rain from her cheek. "Depends," she said coolly. "Is this a rescue mission, or just an experiment to make yourself feel better?" That response, biting and fearless, intrigued him. Ethan tilted his head. "Come with me to a wedding. I'll pay you well. All you have to do is dress up and smile." The woman scoffed. "So I'd be your decorative doll for the evening?" Her sarcasm stung more than he expected. "I can find someone else," he replied flatly. "Then why haven't you?" she shot back, standing now, her frame thin but upright. "I'll do it, but not for the money, just to see what kind of man asks a stranger in the rain to a party of lies." Ethan didn't know whether to be offended or fascinated. He led her to his car, unsure if he was in control of the situation anymore. The woman introduced herself as Lena Carter. She didn't ask many questions, and that made Ethan nervous. She accepted the ride, the offer, and the mystery with unsettling ease. As the city rolled past the tinted windows, Ethan tried to explain, to frame the narrative of his past heartbreak, but Lena barely reacted. "Sounds like you're not over her," she said simply. Ethan frowned. "And what makes you think that?" Lena turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Because you're still trying to win." The next stop was one of the most exclusive salons in the city, a place where celebrities' whispered secrets and reputations were born. When they walked in, Ethan was greeted with respectful nods. Lena, on the other hand, drew skeptical glances from the staff, but she met their judgment with indifference. Everything Ethan said to the lead stylist: hair, makeup, wardrobe. "She needs a full transformation." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Still sure you want to do this?" Ethan nodded without a word. Lena was escorted to a plush chair, and the makeover began. As the stylists untangled her hair, she closed her eyes and relaxed, completely unbothered by the chaos around her. One of them asked if she was nervous, and she smirked. "I've been in this world before. Fancy salons and empty compliments don't impress me." Ethan, sitting in the waiting area, overheard her and felt his curiosity deepen. Who was this woman? Time passed slowly as Ethan scrolled through his phone, unable to focus. When they finally called him back in, he stood quickly, unsure what to expect. But the woman who stood before him now wasn't the one he had picked up on the street. Lena emerged like she had walked out of a magazine, elegant black dress, hugging her figure, her hair cascading in soft waves, her face glowing with subtle, flawless makeup. She didn't look shocked by the transformation. In fact, she studied herself in the mirror with cool detachment, like she'd seen this version of herself before. Ethan stood silent for a moment. "You don't seem surprised," he finally said. Lena turned, her lips curving into a half smile. "Because I'm not." She accepted the purse handed to her and walked past him. "You wanted to make an impression. Let's go make one." Ethan followed, unsettled by the fact that he no longer felt in control. As they drove toward the venue, Ethan stole glances at Lena, searching for cracks in her poise, but she was unreadable. Most people, when thrust into luxury, would show signs: nervous tics, self-doubt, or Lena had. None of those. Her confidence wasn't loud, but it was complete. "You're very quiet," he said. "Should I be nervous?" she asked. "Is this a setup?" He chuckled. "It's a wedding. My ex's, to be exact." Lena didn't flinch. So I was right. Revenge date. She looked out the window again. "Let's hope she's watching when we walk in." Ethan realized she wasn't just playing along, she was playing her own game, and for the first time in years, he didn't know how it would end. By the time they pulled up to the Grand Hotel hosting the wedding, Ethan felt the tide had already shifted. He had started the day seeking control image, maybe even vindication, but sitting next to him now was a woman who had flipped the script without effort. She stepped out of the car with grace that turned every head. Guests and photographers paused to take in the stunning stranger at Ethan Walker's side. But Lena didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't bask in the attention. She simply walked chin-lifted, with the calm of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to reveal. Ethan extended his arm, which she took, and together they entered the lion's den. The night was just beginning, but he already knew this wasn't going to be the story he thought it was. And Lena Carter. She was no one side character. She was about to rewrite the ending. The grand ballroom of the Lancaster Regency Hotel shimmered beneath chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen rain. Classical music drifted from the corner orchestra, softening the tension that naturally brewed in rooms where reputations mattered more than warmth. The wedding of Claire Bennett was a social event, an exhibition of elegance, money, and well-placed smiles. Ethan Walker stepped from the sleek black car with practiced ease, adjusting his tailored suit as cameras clicked nearby. But the moment Lena Carter emerged, the whispers began. She didn't just walk. She owned the space. Draped in an emerald gown that caught the light like silk over fire, her chin was high, her expression unreadable. Conversations paused, heads turned, and jaws subtly slackened. People who had dismissed Ethan as a jaded bachelor now wondered who this enigmatic woman at his side was. "She's not his usual type," someone murmured. "She's stunning." But there was more than beauty. It was the poise, the mystery, the way she moved like the room belonged to her. Inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and golden sconces, Claire stood near the champagne fountain, her laughter ringing like wind chimes. When her eyes caught Ethan's, her smile faltered, but only for a second. Then she noticed Lena. The reaction was instinctual, a quick sweep of the stranger's figure, a flicker of recognition she couldn't place. As Ethan approached, Lena remained poised, offering a subtle, elegant smile. Claire Ethan greeted smoothly. "This is Lena Carter." Before Claire could formulate a response, Lena extended a perfectly manicured hand. "A pleasure," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. Claire hesitated a beat before shaking it. "Have we met before?" Claire asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Lena tilted her head, smiling just enough. "Possibly the world of the elite is smaller than it likes to admit." The words hung in the air like perfume, pleasant on the surface, but provocative underneath. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. The game had begun, and Lena was playing it better than he ever expected. As the evening unfolded, Lena continued to captivate. She didn't fumble or cling. She navigated the ballroom with grace, matching Ethan's stride, occasionally branching off to speak with guests on her own. She held conversations with confidence, discussing everything from art to emerging tech startups with ease that unnerved people who assumed she was merely a pretty accessory. She must be someone one guest whispered to another, an heiress. A European investor, Claire, who had been the center of attention just hours before, now found herself watching from the sidelines. When Lena briefly referenced a former fiancé during a toast, "Love is fragile. I once thought I had it too, until I realized I was never the right fit for his family." Claire's expression tensed. She sipped her champagne to hide the crack in her facade, but Ethan noticed, so did Lena. That wasn't just a subtle jab. It was a declaration, a story within a sentence, and Claire heard every word. Later in the evening, as the string quartet struck up a waltz, Ethan offered Lena his hand. "Care to dance?" She didn't answer. She simply placed her hand in his and followed him to the center of the room. Under the golden lights, the two moved like they'd done this before. Lena's steps were precise, her movements fluid, but more than that, her eyes remained fixed on Ethan's, sharp and searching. "You knew what you were doing," he whispered during a turn. "Did I?" she replied, her lips curving. "You wanted a reaction. I gave it to you." Around them, the chatter shifted. Guests who had once speculated now watched in awe. Lena wasn't just holding her own, she was enchanting everyone. A senator's wife approached later to compliment her insight on economic trends. A tech CEO lingered too long in conversation, clearly taken. Ethan watched it all, equal parts proud and puzzled. Claire's carefully constructed world continued to fray at the edges. Every compliment Lena received, every lingering glance from powerful men only deepened her unease. She cornered Ethan near the dessert table. "She's interesting," Claire said, her tone clipped. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You always did have a hard time saying impressive." Claire forced a smile. "I'm just surprised. She doesn't seem your usual type." "That's because she's not a type," he said evenly. "She's real." Claire's eyes narrowed, then flicked toward Lena, who was now speaking with the chairman of a major bank, her hand lightly resting on her glass posture. "Impeccable." Claire turned back, lowering her voice. "Just be careful, Ethan. Sometimes things that shine brightest burn the fastest." Ethan didn't respond. He simply walked away. As the night drew on, Ethan and Lena stepped out onto the terrace city lights sprawling below them. The wind caught her hair, and for the first time Ethan saw something behind the confidence, something like sorrow or memory. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. Lena turned to him, eyes unreadable. "I didn't come to impress your ex, Ethan." He nodded. "I know I came to remind myself." She continued that I still belong in places like this, even if I took the long road back. Ethan looked at her with something new in his eyes, not just curiosity or admiration, but something deeper. "You never left," he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In that moment beneath the glittering sky, she had already said everything that mattered, and Ethan knew Claire wasn't the only one who was rattled tonight. He was too. The following morning, Ethan sat alone in his office, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting warm rectangles across the oak floor. But there was no warmth in him, not after last night. Something about Lena still buzzed in his mind, not just the way she carried herself, but the way she never blinked. When challenged, never seemed out of place. She wasn't some desperate stranger off the street. No, Lena Carter, if that was even her real name, had secrets. Secrets that whispered through her words and lived behind her eyes, with a sense of urgency that surprised even him. Ethan picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "I need you to look into someone for me," he told the man on the other end. "Lena Carter. No last name on record. I want to know everything: who she is, where she's from, what she's hiding." The response was immediate. "Give me 48 hours. But Ethan knew it wouldn't take that long. When someone doesn't leave a trail, it's because they buried it on purpose. Later that evening, as Ethan reviewed reports in his study, his phone buzzed. A single message from his investigator read, "Her name isn't Carter. It's Lena Monroe. And you're not going to believe this." Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. Monroe. That name wasn't just familiar, it was infamous. Thomas Monroe had once been a legend in the construction industry, a visionary who had built half the skyline and earned the respect of even the hardest critics. But years ago, it had all come crashing down. A corruption scandal, fraud, embezzlement. His company dismantled, his name dragged through the media, and at the heart of the scandal, buried in the press, was another name, Claire Bennett. The woman who had been hired as a financial strategist, the woman who had quietly exited just before the accusations began. The woman who later erased any association. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. Lena wasn't just someone with a tragic past. She had a direct line to Claire and a reason to be standing at her wedding. That night, Ethan went straight to the hotel suite he had arranged for Lena. He didn't call first. When she opened the door barefoot and dressed in a worn sweater, she didn't look surprised to see him. "You found out?" she said quietly. Ethan stepped inside, without a word, the door clicking shut behind him. "Lena Monroe," he said, "daughter of Thomas Monroe. Why didn't you tell me?" Lena didn't answer at first. She walked to the window, arms folded tightly around herself. Then finally she spoke. "Because people hear that name and think, thief, liar, a man who stole from investors and ruined lives, but they don't know what really happened." Ethan waited. "Claire Bennett," Lena said bitterly, "wasn't just some strategist. She was embedded in our company. Trusted. She funneled money through shell accounts, falsified ledgers, and made it look like my father signed off on all of it." Her voice broke. By the time the truth began to surface, it was too late. She walked away, clean. "My father lost everything, his company, his reputation, his will to live." Ethan felt his chest tighten as Lena continued. "He died alone, humiliated. My mother couldn't survive the heartbreak. And me, I was left with nothing, not even my name." There was a silence so heavy it seemed to pull the room inward. Ethan sat down across from her, watching the woman he had once thought was simply a curiosity. "Why didn't you come forward?" he asked gently. Lena turned to him, fire in her eyes. Who would believe a broken girl over a golden darling like Claire? She buried the truth and planted lies so deep no one questioned them. Her jaw clenched. "I tried to clear his name. I fought for years. But doors kept closing. Friends vanished. Records disappeared. Eventually I stopped fighting and just tried to survive." Ethan couldn't look away. The strength it must have taken to crawl out from that kind of ruin and then step into a ballroom with the woman who destroyed her life. "You didn't come to that wedding for me," he said quietly. "You came for her." Lena met his gaze. "I came to see if she'd recognize me, if she'd show even a flicker of guilt." She didn't. Ethan stood and crossed the room to her. He didn't touch her. He wasn't sure if she would let him, but his voice softened. "You should have told me. I would have helped." Lena shook her head. "I didn't need help. I needed to remember who I used to be." A silence passed between them again, but this time it wasn't filled with tension. It was filled with something closer to understanding. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I believe you." "Every word." Lena's eyes flickered with disbelief. "You do." He nodded. "And I want to help make it right. Not just for your father, but for you. Whatever it takes." Lena blinked, unsure how to respond. Why she whispered, "Because I care," Ethan admitted. "And because I think I'm starting to feel something for you that scares the hell out of me." The words hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. The next morning, Ethan made good on his promise. He reached out to a team of legal experts, former investigative journalists, and forensic accountants, people who owed him favors, people who weren't afraid to dig. As the wheels began to turn, he stood at the window of his office, watching the city below. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. He no longer saw Lena as a mystery to be solved or a means to an end. She was a storm that had survived its own destruction. And now, with him by her side, she wasn't just going to survive, she was going to rise. For the first time in years, Ethan felt purpose beyond profit, and it began with one simple truth. Claire Bennett had made a grave mistake. She thought she buried the past. But the past was standing in heels, head held high, ready to fight back, and this time she wasn't alone. The morning Lena Monroe's name hit the headlines, the city seemed to pause. Every major media outlet ran the same narrative: socialite imposter exposed, homeless woman at high society wedding has a hidden past. Accompanying the story were photos from Claire's wedding, Lena in her emerald gown, her poised expression now framed by captions dripping with judgment. The article painted her as a fraud, a manipulator who had weaseled her way into Ethan Walker's world under false pretenses. It detailed her father's scandal, twisted old accusations, and insinuated that Lena had returned for revenge or worse, personal gain. Ethan slammed the magazine shut, fury rising in his chest. He didn't need to guess who orchestrated it. Claire had struck first, using the media like a blade, sharp and public. But what she didn't know was that Ethan and Lena were already steps ahead, and they had the truth. That evening, Lena stood in front of the mirror in Ethan's penthouse, her hands clenched at her sides. "It's happening again," she said quietly. "She's turning the world against me before I even have a chance to speak." Ethan stepped behind her, his reflection calm but burning with determination. "Not this time," he said. "We're going to end it." On the table behind them sat a thick folder evidence compiled by Ethan's team financial records, forged documents with Claire's signature email threads implicating her in the embezzlement that ruined Monroe Enterprises. Even a taped confession from a former accountant who had helped Claire shift the blame. Lena looked at the folder, then at Ethan. "If we go through with this, there's no turning back." He nodded. "That's the point." And so they prepared not for revenge, but for justice. 2 nights later, the Harrington Foundation Gala brought together the city's most powerful. The ballroom shimmered in gold, champagne flowed, and Claire Bennett moved through the crowd like royalty. Her laughter was performative, her smiles tight. She knew Ethan would attend. What she didn't expect was Lena to walk in beside him. Gasps rippled across the room as the couple entered. Lena dressed in black velvet, her chin high. Despite the media storm, Claire's jaw tightened. "You're bold, I'll give you that," she hissed when they crossed paths. Lena didn't flinch. Not bold, prepared. At that moment, Ethan turned to the press station near the stage. "We have something to share," he said. Raising his voice, all eyes shifted. He handed the folder to the MC, who reluctantly took the mic and began reading from the enclosed documents. The room fell into stunned silence as the truth unraveled every name, every number, every detail leading back to Claire. And then came the sound that shifted everything. The clink of heels followed by the steady footsteps of 2 officers making their way through the ballroom. Claire Bennett, one of them, announced, "You are under arrest for financial fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement." Claire's eyes widened. "This is absurd." "I built this city," she shouted as handcuffs snapped around her wrists. "Tell them, Ethan. This is a setup." But Ethan's expression was stone. "No, Claire. This is justice." Cameras flashed, guests whispered, and the room that had once applauded her now watched in quiet horror as she was escorted out. Claire's empire collapsed, not in flames, but in the quiet click of evidence and the weight of truth. For the first time in years, Lena stood in the center of the room, without shame, no longer a target, no longer a ghost. She had reclaimed her name and her power. In the days that followed, Lena's story was retold, but this time through her own voice. The press, who once vilified her, now sought interviews. Talk shows wanted her opinion on corporate corruption, and old family friends resurfaced with apologies. But Lena remained guarded. It wasn't fame she sought. It was peace. One evening after the chaos had died down, Ethan took her to the rooftop, where they had once watched the city in silence. The air was warm, the skyline glowing. "You said once that you stopped fighting," he said. "But you never really did." Lena looked at him heart full, "because for the first time in a long time I had someone beside me." Ethan stepped closer, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Let's keep standing together," he said, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Lena Monroe. Tears welled in her eyes, not from shock but from certainty. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times. "Yes." They embraced beneath the stars, not as a man and woman who had been broken, but as partners who had rebuilt something far stronger than revenge. Their story had started in pain, detoured through betrayal, and weathered every storm thrown at it. But here, in this quiet moment, it transformed into something new: love, justice, renewal. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, and in their place a future waited one. Lena never thought she'd deserve, and one Ethan never imagined he'd find. Together they had taken back everything that had been stolen, and together they would begin again. The waves lapped gently against the shore as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting golden light across the ceremony. There were no grand ballrooms or ornate chandeliers this time, just the sea, the sand, and the people who mattered. Lena Monroe walked down a path lined with white roses, her gown flowing like sea foam in the breeze. Ethan waited beneath a flowered arch, his eyes never leaving hers. Their wedding was intimate, honest, and free from the weight of high society's expectations. There were no whispers of scandal, only tears of joy and heartfelt applause when they exchanged their vows. Ethan spoke of her courage, her fire, and how loving her had changed him forever. Lena, her voice steady but full of emotion, promised to never again run from love or from herself. When they were pronounced husband and wife, they kissed beneath the painted sky, not as people who had survived scandal, but as two souls finally at peace. It was the first day of the life they had both earned. Weeks later, Lena stared down at the small white stick in her hand, disbelief flickering across her face. Two pink lines, her breath caught, and for a moment she wasn't sure if she wanted to laugh or cry. She waited for Ethan to return home, pacing the floor of their apartment, unsure how to tell him. When he finally walked through the door, she barely managed to whisper, "We're having a baby." Ethan's eyes widened with wonder, and then came the purest smile she'd ever seen. He pulled her into a tight embrace, lifting her off the floor. "We're going to be parents," he said, voice hushed with awe. But the surprise didn't end there. At the first ultrasound appointment, the doctor turned the screen and said, "You're expecting twins, a boy and a girl." Lena's hand flew to her mouth, her heart swelling with overwhelming joy. Ethan simply squeezed her hand and whispered, "Double the love, double the future," amid the whirlwind of building a family. Lena launched her next great venture, Monroe Strategies, a boutique consulting firm that focused on ethical business development, social innovation, and strategic turnarounds. She didn't want to simply re-enter the business world, she wanted to reshape it. With a small, loyal team and a reputation that had risen from the ashes, Lena crafted a brand that stood for integrity, vision, and resilience. Ethan supported her quietly, never trying to take the spotlight, never trying to lead her journey. He attended meetings when asked, watched the babies during late-night pitch deck revisions, and reminded her on the hard days that her past didn't define her. It fueled her. In boardrooms once dominated by polished cynicism, Lena walked in with fire in her eyes and a clear voice. People listened not just because of her name, but because she had something real to say. Their home became a haven of laughter, learning, and love. Ethan, who had once been consumed by power and appearances, now found joy in bedtime stories, pancake breakfasts, and walks in the park with their twins. Lena, who had once fought tooth and nail just to survive, now thrived in both her business and personal life. They didn't have a perfect marriage. There were disagreements, sleepless nights, and chaotic days, but they had something stronger: partnership. When one faltered, the other carried more. When one succeeded, the other celebrated louder. Their love, forged in fire and tested by betrayal, became the foundation for something far greater than either had imagined. They weren't just rewriting their own story. They were building a legacy, one choice, one day at a time. As Monroe Strategies grew, so did their impact. Lena began mentoring young women who had been cast aside by the system, sharing her story. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a roadmap of resilience, Ethan started a scholarship fund in Thomas Monroe's name, helping disadvantaged youth pursue careers in architecture and engineering, the dream that had once belonged to Lena's father. On the anniversary of their wedding, they stood on that same beach, watching their children chase waves and seagulls. "This is what we built," Ethan whispered. Lena leaned into him, her heart full. "And we're just getting started." In the end, Lena and Ethan were not defined by the wounds they carried or the battles they had fought. They were defined by how they rose, by how they chose love over and over again, by how they turned pain into purpose. and by how, against all odds, they created a life not of revenge or redemption, but of meaning, strength, and hope. The story of Lena Monroe was no longer one of tragedy. It was a legacy, a new beginning. If this story moved, you don't forget to support our journey by subscribing to Deep Inside HQ. Every story we share is a reminder that truth, love, and resilience can overcome even the darkest of trials. Hit the like button if you believe in second chances, share this video with someone who needs hope, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that stirs the heart and inspires the soul. Together, let's keep telling the stories that matter.